Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Loving the Moon. I'm Peter Lancet, and with me is Julie Grint. Would you like to say hello, Julie?
I would. Hello. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm fine. I always ask you this, don't I? How are you anyway today, Julie? Because it's freezing here.
It's freezing here as well. Freezing here. But I saw the moon, and it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and
Yeah, you can see it in a nice clear sky.
yeah, beautiful.
And we're in a waxing moon, aren't we now? So
We are indeed.
Why did I say that as though I was actually questioning it? Because it's not like I don't look at this every day. So I did. And we're in the star sign of Capricorn, for those of you who care. And that's why it's freezing here in our part of the Northern Hemisphere. We've got ice and snow on the floor, and all kinds of horror and nonsense for that. Although I have to say, I prefer ice and snow to mud and rain.
Oh, yeah, me too. I'm with you on that one.
Every time, yeah.
Absolutely.
Every time. It looks great. So we'll do that. Now, today we're going to look at phases of the moon and how different phases can affect our health and well-being. This is largely what our podcasts are going to be about, although we will shift off in different directions at other points. But I just wanted to come back to something that I said in the last podcast, which is our first one, the introductory podcast. And I did mention that the moon is a weird thing, even though there it is up in the sky, and it's been there, for as long as we know. And there are certain things that science, people say, follow the science. Well, I followed the science. We'll start off with a little quote from Albert Einstein. He said that condemnation without investigation is the highest form of ignorance. And then we come to a couple of scientists. Now, I mentioned one of these things, but I didn't give the name. I forgot to give the name of the person who did it. But let's start off with a guy called Erwin Shapiro, who was an astrophysicist at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And this is a lovely quote. "The best possible explanation for the moon is observational error, as though the moon doesn't actually exist, because we have no way of proving how it can be there, how it can stay there, how it got there." Another quote I'll give you, and I'm only going to give these two, but I will put in the notes below this podcast a link to a page where you'll see everything. And if people want to know more about, even more than that, that book that I mentioned, Who Built the Moon, go out and find it. You probably have to get a secondhand copy from one of the booksellers, but it's fantastic. But here's another explanation. The moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be. It's much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence, I'll repeat that, all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight.
Wow.
So when we're told to follow the science, I've just done it. Because that last quote was from Farouk Elbaz, who's also a NASA astrophysicist. Nobody can prove a damn thing. And what's more, when they come up with theories, the theories are so easily pulled apart that you don't even have to be an astrophysicist to pull it apart. But it's nice to have quotes from astrophysicists that do tell you, we ain't got a clue. We just haven't got a clue. So what I do want to say, though, is one thing we do know. When Erwin Shapiro said, the best explanation is that it doesn't exist and you're seeing something that's not there.
I love that.
He doesn't mean that it isn't there. That's just his way of saying, we haven't got a clue how it could possibly be there doing what it does. But it is there. We know it. We see it. And we know that it does have an effect on all of nature, the rhythms of nature. We've mentioned that it is like the conductor of nature's orchestra, and nature follows the rhythms, and the moon is guiding us.
Absolutely.
And we have natural rhythms from the sun. The moon reflects the sun's light to us as well, so that we have 24-hour access to what's going on. And it's really good, and I find it really fascinating.
It
So
is
let's come.
fascinating. It is
Let
fascinating. And sorry, Pete, just to chime
no,
in
no,
there,
you go. Yeah.
I love that what Shapiro said. And it's like, so what does that teach us then, really? What you just said there about the rhythms of the moon and the effects it has on nature. And we have to let go at times, don't we? And just
Yeah, we do.
allow our inner guidance to lead the way. And
And that's yeah.
yeah, just
Go on.
kind of not dismissing science, but understanding what science truly means.
Well, yeah. Go on. You've spoken to me about this before and what science really means.
Yeah, and you gave me a wonderful breakdown of where the word comes from. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with
Yeah.
me again, because I can't
Yeah.
remember. But
It's quite simple. It's a Latin word. Scientia means knowledge,
mm,
but knowledge only comes when you investigate,
mm,
not when you make up a theory. It's not an opinion.
mm,
Scientia, knowledge, is not an opinion. Yeah.
mm,
It's something that's actually been worked out, found out. Empirical
mm.
science means that you have to go into a lab or go out into nature and actually see what's happening.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and recognizing that it is a part of nature, and because we're a part of nature, then we're all one. It's about learning how to integrate that into our life rather than
Oh,
standing there and going, why? What is it? Who put that there? And accepting really that it's a part of
mm.
who we are.
And maybe, you know, we will discover how the moon is there and where it came from one day. But it doesn't matter to us today. I'm not a scientist. I'm not investigating it. I wouldn't know how to begin. But they do, and they are looking into it, and they come up with the odd theories. The problem we have is when theories are put forward, and then everybody who's not a scientist, sees a theory as a fact. Well, I don't really, we're not talking about the moon now. We're going off on a tangent. But the word theory does have its own meaning. Theory. If something's called a theory, doesn't mean that it's a fact. So don't keep telling us to follow the science if you're not convinced about anybody else's opinion on it, because a theory is an opinion, basically. Yeah, when all's said and done. Anyway, I want to come back to how the moon's phases help us. I could talk about all of this all day. Can you?
Well, this is
Because
the thing, behind closed doors we do, don't we, Pete?
yeah, well, we do, but the following the science is important, I think.
Yeah.
But don't get caught up with a theory.
But it's about understanding the science of nature, the laws of nature, and nature is the key word. And
I
in
think so.
science today, it's very much, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, the nature element is far removed.
Well, there was a problem that started early 20th century when Einstein came out with his general and special theories of relativity. And we shifted massively from looking at nature in the aspect of looking at the universe. We stopped looking at the universe and we started trying to calculate what was going on up there. Before that happened, mathematics wasn't a thing. We used to understand that astronomy was all about what you can actually observe. And now it's not. And by the way, people who think massively that things are factual, there is absolutely no proof whatsoever that dark matter is a real thing. None. There is no proof whatsoever that the Big Bang actually happened. And in fact, because of Hubble's redshift, that was the only way that we could get the Big Bang as a thing. It's been disproven, and even Hubble knew that redshift, just before he died, he thought, people have rushed into using this now. He said, it was just a theory. It was just something I came up with by something that I'd observed. But Big Bang, It can't, because the redshift now, since we've had, which telescope up in space? That's right, the Hubble telescope. This is so ironic and wonderful. We've found things where items that shouldn't be visible because they should be behind a galaxy, not in front of it, because their redshift is at a point where it should be further away. I'm not going to say more than that. There's loads of that's happened. Yet people still talk about redshift, and they still talk about Big Bang, even though there's a very good reason for saying it didn't happen. And the best one yet? Black hole. Oh dear. Guess what we've seen with the big telescopes up in space now? We've seen what we're called black holes with things being spouted out of them. They are struggling like crazy and rushing to their blackboards to put their mathematical systems to the test to try and find an explanation for a black hole, which is so powerfully dense that even light can't escape from it. But we've now observed things that everybody's been calling a black hole. Well, all the scientists were calling a black hole, but it's got stuff coming out of it. And they're starting to say, this black hole was so powerful, it pulled stuff in from one side and that spurted out the other side. But then it's not the black hole you were telling us, was it? Once the stuff came in, it shouldn't have been able to escape from the other side. Carry on. But observational experience, an empirical experience of nature becomes factual. If I see a blade of grass growing, it's a fact. There it is. It came up at this time of the year, only after the temperature reached this sort of level and blah, 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 and it needed this, that, and the other. If it didn't have all of those aspects of nature, it wouldn't have grown. It's just simple as that.
And it is simple, isn't it? And this is the key, health. Our health is simple when we break it down. And I love that you've brought up, that topic there and that key word also, which is observation, because we must learn how to be the observers of ourselves and of our health. And,
Perfect.
It's just, how science, and I'm not blaming science, as a whole, but the way that, let's say, for argument's sake, symptoms, we'll have a symptom, and the way that we observe those symptoms is based on someone else's ideas of what that might mean about us, rather than taking the time to observe what we are uniquely experiencing, when, why, how, where, what, and all of the experience that has led to that moment, to determine what is occurring for us in our health and in our bodies.
And it's very difficult to do that, isn't it? Because we've grown up now in an age, where what we're told from a scientific pharmacological, is that even a word, point of view, is telling us what's happening and how we should handle it. I'm not so sure that that's a good way of doing things personally, but we've all grown up with it, where we're told this. And now it's even worse because people Google their symptoms.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, because the only things that come up tend to be terribly frightening.
And I realised, after many years, that way just didn't work for me. I never got any respite from any of my pain or my problems. And until I changed that, until I looked to nature and the moon, that was when everything changed for the better.
And I think that could work for all of us. I do. I mean, and I do the same as you. And I grew up, I'll need to take a tablet for this, and I'll need to do this. No, it doesn't work for me. It must be 50 years since I started taking any, pills. People take it used to be paracetamol. I don't know whether what is it now? Ibuprofen, which is the fashionable one now. When I was a kid, it was aspirin.
Yeah.
So at least now aspirin has its foundations in nature.
Yeah,
because it came off the bark of a tree. So originally, which is a natural thing, but then they turned it into a chemical, nature-based thing. But, either way, we can do it. We can look for it. There are great books that you can find to help you with wellness, natural wellness, if you want to go down that road. For me, looking inside at the symptoms is something that we should do personally, and we can show people. We can teach people how to do that if they don't know, and if they want to know how to do it, we'll come up with. I mean, obviously, we're running podcasts here, but at some point, we're gonna do things. We're gonna record things, maybe, or run online workshops and so on. Later in this year, I think, and we'll literally show people and then get people to experience how to go in and look within themselves at where they are, who they are, and what they want to be, how they can be there. And that's wellness, health, and happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness comes out at the end of all of that. And I think that's why looking at the phases of the moon and learning how to surf that wave, I use that analogy all the time now. I can't help
But
it.
it's a fantastic analogy.
I know, I do love it. But yeah, we can surf that wave, and we can actually make things happen in our own lives that are great for us.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say something silly while we're at it. We need to have a little logo of you and I on a surfboard.
I'd be falling off. I did try in California once. I wasn't any good at
Not
it.
for me either.
I couldn't stand up on the damn thing, so that was the end of that. And I'm not going to try to learn it because I've got better things to do now. Well, not better things. I mean, I would love to do it, but it would take too much time for me to learn it. But nevertheless, the other thing I wanted to say, though, about what we'll talk about today that I think is really interesting is that if we can look at how natural phases like moon phases that then move other natural phases of other aspects of nature on this planet, because we're only interested in the ones that are on this planet, really. And then we can move with the moon, move with the nature that happens around it, all around us, and it can make things work. If we don't do that, if we don't look at ourselves, if we don't investigate ourselves, and we only cope with what we see from media, from a doctor or something like this, and we always have to put up with somebody else's point of view, then we're not going to succeed in making our own unique presence happy, well, and healthy presence.
Perfectly put.
And I do think that's something that we've got to do. Now, we got some notes, hadn't we? What we're going to talk about? Ha ha ha.
Well, it fits in with what we have been talking about, and observing how the moon affects nature and affects us.
If you have an idea in your mind about something that you're going through as let's call it a health issue or a health problem, and you only look at how to manage the symptom, it's never really going to go away. Most people don't realize, and I didn't, for the early part of my life. It's not like I grew up knowing what I'm about to say, but I do know this to be a fact now, not an opinion, not a theory, but a fact. There's been a lot of research and evidence done that the way you are emotionally, if you don't spot that and work with it, will actually realize itself as a physical problem more often than not. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but more often than not. There's plenty of experience of it. I have personal experience of it that I can talk about. I can give an experience, but there has been a lot of research into this, and it's like, whenever we have stressful moments, that can come. Well, the easiest one to mention is, why do you think you get a headache? I don't get, but most people seem to. Hence the selling of ibuprofen and paracetamol in the billions of dollars zone. But I don't have headaches. But why do people think they get a headache? What is it that they think is causing that?
Well, it's not a lack of paracetamol, is it?
I wouldn't have thought so, because there's plenty of that. But you're quite right. I mean, it's usually something that's going on. It can be something that you're very much aware of. Some stress that you're going through. It could be work. It could be a relationship. It could be all financial. It could be any kind of thing. But it could be something that's somewhere underground within you, somewhere in the subconscious or unconscious aspect of you. Something emotional that needs to be faced, needs to be looked at, needs to be worked upon. And what that emotion is doing is getting your body to say, please pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. It happens a lot, and that's just a headache. I usually get pain, starts on the left side of my neck, goes all the way down my shoulder and halfway down my back. And it actually is really painful. And then when I realize, okay, something's here, I will sort that. It's usually when I'm driving, and it's like, why can't it do that when I'm in the house, when I've got plenty of time to just deal with it? But then I say, okay, look, I recognize that you're there. You have my attention. I am driving. When I get a moment, we'll deal with the problem. But usually then the problem comes into my head and I know what to do and I can make it go away very quickly. Well, when I say make it, it goes away naturally, simply because I'm facing it, I'm accepting it. The problem itself has come into my mind. I don't have to deal with the problem. Just knowing that the problem is, it's that problem that's making me say, you need to deal with this. You need to deal with this. And then when I get the opportunity, I'll face that up and I'll do the best I can.
And on the other side of that, which is, what many others do, and no judgment, no criticism, but by taking the pill to plaster the symptom, you're just prolonging the agony. It's not resolving anything, and it will come up again, it will come back, it will remain, it will get worse, it will transmute into something else. And, you'll never find a solution at the bottom of that packet of paracetamol.
It's worth mentioning as well, because that is really true, what you said, but it can get worse. I mean, it can manifest as something else. And there's a lot of talk now in the medical science that this particular thing, these stresses and these problems that we have that go unresolved, that we do not face ourselves uniquely, we go to the doctor, we go to the pharmacist, we take the pill, we take the medicine. It can end up leading to serious illnesses. I'm not just talking about a headache now. We're talking about cancers, heart problems, all kinds of things can manifest if we don't look at natural things. And have you noticed the more stressful life has become in the last 100 years? We're seeing more diseases and illnesses that we never noticed before. I mean, growing up as a child at my age, given the age that I am, there weren't half the diseases then that there are now. I'm not saying they didn't exist. It's just that they were so few and far between and rare, you never heard about them. There are things that keep cropping up now. TV adverts here in the UK are saying 1 in 2 people will get cancer. Doesn't say which kind of cancer or anything, just some kind of... Well, thanks for telling us that, because 1 in 2 people now will, because you've put it in their brains and you program into thinking that, I'm bound to get it.
Yeah, watch out for those subliminal messages, folks.
Yeah, but it is there. When these things are said and they're repeated and repeated and repeated, do you start believing them? Yeah. Unconsciously, you might. Yeah. Subconsciously, you might, without wanting to, and suddenly you're in that mix. I think it's pretty grim. But what I'm really talking about, though, is the fact that, if we don't look into ourselves and investigate ourselves, we're prone to have things happen physically that didn't need to happen.
This is how the moon can help us, right?
Yes, let's get back to the moon. So, I mean, those physical and people's attitudes as well, like, well, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pill. I'm just going to get rid of this. I've got my life to live and all the rest of it. And also the ones that say, well, doing meditational work, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about in meditational work where you're focusing on yourself, where the meditation you do is focusing on yourself. The answers to your problems usually come and surface when you do this. And anyway, but people want to do it. This idea, I mean, when you get a symptom for something like a headache, that's like smoke from an invisible fire. If you haven't seen it, you can't see the fire, but you're seeing the smoke. Well, unless you put the fire out, the smoke will keep coming back.
Exactly.
If all that's all I said. Now, you were telling me something once about illness being predetermined by genetics. It's a big belief system that's been given to us.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but a lot of the time we are, pre-programmed when, there is a family member, a parent, a grandparent who's being labelled with a condition, and therefore it's kind of your destiny that you two are going to inherit this condition.
Yep.
And a lot
You're all
of the
going to have a heart attack.
Yeah. And it's very disempowering because, it takes us away from our own natural ability to be healthy. You are not your grandparent or your parent, you are you. And we have to appreciate that, we're constantly changing, constantly evolving. And if we are a part of nature, we can see that the cycles of nature are constantly changing and evolving, just as the moon phases constantly change and evolve. So we've got every opportunity to work with that rhythm of nature to change and evolve our health for the better.
We definitely do. And that just, while you were saying that just came to my mind. Certainly when we used to have industry in the UK, and we had heavy industry like, steel making, but I grew up in an area that had coal mining. So let me just give you this example. If your family, the men in your family, had been working down a coal mine for generation and generation and generation, there's a very good chance that they would have lung diseases and perhaps not even live a long life, and other things that happen from that kind of work. And also, it was hard. It would really break you working down a coal mine. If you then decided in the 1960s, say, I ain't doing that. I'm not going to work down the pit like you did, Dad. I'm going to go to London and seek my fortune. Why would you wander around the world then thinking, every man in my family died in their 50s or very early 60s, and think that was going to happen to you? You have moved out of what caused their problem. And it's a good example. I mean, some examples are not as obvious and easy to pin down as that one, but we shouldn't actually put ourselves on the same platform that generations before have all done, because remember, some of those generations, it only happened to them because they believed in what had happened to the ones before. You can just break that spell.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we have to also challenge the status quo, because whilst there might be science that supports some kind of hereditary genetic factor, there is also plenty of science that supports the complete opposite, and people are able to turn their health around and change their genetics through a healthier lifestyle.
And so whichever one of those systems that you choose to follow and believe will, you'll get the result that they want you to have. Well, not that they want you to. I'm not going to complain and say that they all want you to die early or something like this. But if you follow the side that says it doesn't have to be this way, then guess what? It doesn't have to be this way. I'm saying this as a hypnotist because this is what we do under hypnosis to get people to do things, to make changes in their lives. Whether that's on the stage or whether it's in a therapeutic environment. Either way, it's what people will believe is how they will act it out.
Yeah. What you believe is what you perceive, right?
That's the one. And and what you believe becomes your reality. That's that. And when that's a positive, isn't that fantastic? When that's a negative, not so good.
Mm.
And
Just
all we've
remember.
got to, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Go on.
sorry, no, go on. All we've got to do is make the choice, right?
Yeah. So from us, we're given beliefs from our childhood. We're born, and the first things that we'll believe are the things that we see our parents believing and what we hear. And once we understand language, what we hear them saying and what they tell us, then what our family tells us, then what our teachers tell us, and so on. And we will believe it. We don't tend to challenge that. Most people don't tend to challenge that at all. My suggestion is challenge it. Once you understand that it's there to be challenged, it doesn't matter what age, even if you're like, oh, but I'm in my 70s, it's too late now. No, it's not. Challenge it. You can be into your hundreds if you can. If you want to, I don't know. But you challenge everything. Challenge everything. And then it'll work for you. Because what happens is we become locked into a morality cage, is what I call it, as a morality cage. But it's a belief cage. It's a cage that keeps us all in one place. And it's very narrow. And we can't expand our lives and enjoy it. It could stop us from enjoying that flow of nature.
Yeah. Stop us getting on that surfboard, Pete.
Oh, you're not going to get on the surfboard if you're working down a coal mine every day, are you? You need the freedom to travel the world and find surfing waves and so on. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is. And the moon helps us, We've got self-responsibility in health, haven't we? But self-responsibility that is like the real link with health.
Absolutely. And for me, it's about taking ownership, and recognizing that you absolutely can. Plants aren't out there, queuing up at the doctor's surgery, are they? They're shedding their leaves, they're dropping their seeds, they die, they regrow, and that's the cycle of nature.
The interesting thing about that is as well, you can also see things that you wouldn't necessarily notice unless somebody pointed it out to you. But if you watch a tree coming into the autumn, the leaves don't all fall at the same time. They don't all change color at the same time. Some leaves will last longer than others. They're not all the same. And it's the same with us. As human beings, we're not all the same. And bear in mind, we're talking about leaves that are all on the same tree here. So they should have that genetic... Shouldn't they? They should have that genetic sense that we're all going to do the same thing at the same age. But they don't.
Oh.
I mean, do frogs all live to be the same age? I have no idea. I'm not talking, I'm not talking about putting them all in a jar. But do you think they do? I don't think so. I think animals out in the wild, some will live longer than others. You can't say that horses will all live to the age of 17 and every horse will drop dead on its 17th birthday, will you, can you? There is uniqueness and we should follow our own flow.
Yeah. Yes. Boom.
Yeah. God. Oh, dear.
So we're going to get into that, aren't we, about how we can actually do that and how the moon can assist us with that.
Well, the moon's phases are what we should be talking about. Like the moon has these waxing and waning phases. So waxing is when it's starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it has a full moon. Then it starts getting smaller and smaller, the waning phase, to the point where it becomes dark and you can't see it at all. So really, I mean, how many phases do you want to say? Some people say, oh, there are 3 phases to the moon, and they'll see, some people say 4 quarters. And so on.
Yeah.
Does the moon know about this?
Yeah. I highly doubt it.
I don't think so. I doubt it as well. And if we associate the moon with, the time that we've invented, the clock time, we're going to struggle, because how long is the moon full? What? You couldn't say it, because here it is. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now it's getting smaller and smaller. At what point does it? It won't stay big for any point in time that we can actually measure.
Yeah.
Because it's constantly on the move. Therefore, it doesn't stand still and say, here, for the next 2 seconds, I'm still. Okay, now I'm going smaller again. It doesn't do that. It can't do that. It's constantly moving, so there isn't a point at which it's actually that we can say, oh, it's a second, it's a half a second, it's a microsecond, it's a nanosecond, or whatever. We can't say that.
Just like when you're on a surfboard, Pete, you don't just stop and then change direction, do you? It doesn't work like that. The sea's moving, everything's moving.
Actually, that's a great one, isn't it? The surfing one, when you look at that, because the sea could be moving in different directions as you're surfing, and you can carry the part of it that's going to take you that way, or you can move and just flow to the left. You can go down those pipes, those water pipes and stuff,
But this is the thing with the moon, and this whole movement, this whole aspect of change, and change being this, one of the biggest things that people struggle with the most, for all sorts of reasons. But just understanding that what we're going to share with you is really easy ways to simply let nature live your healthiest life. But those moon phases can support you in understanding your emotions better. The moon can help you with your diet. It can help you with your your activities, your day to day. There's just so much to it that when you let go and ride the wave, life is just so much more fun and easy.
Oh, yeah. And it's healthier, because once you start following the rhythm of the moon, and then that links you into the rhythms of nature. I mean, people have said to me before, what do you mean following the rhythms of nature? I mean, well, quite simple. Natural food choices. Natural, nature, it's the same word. I think that can affect your health. Down to you what you choose to eat. But if you're going to eat a bag of crisps and a bag of Doritos and stuff, and not cook a meal, that's up to you. But if you look at natural food rather than processed food, okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop the profits coming to a factory or a company, but the fact of it is, the more natural the food that you eat, the healthier you're going to be. By the way, that's proven, well proven. Medical science will prove that to you as well, if you want it. Nutritional science will prove it to you too. So what's naturally available and what's not naturally available? That could mean that you can't eat the same food all the time. There'll be certain things that are available at certain times of the year. If you're really going to become natural, you're going to eat locally. Not everybody can. But I always find it strange when people want to have fresh strawberries in winter in England. It's like, hang on, they've had to be shipped in from somewhere. And then they've had to have been grown in these sort of factory growing centers. If you have a look at those polythene tent things, they go for miles and miles, growing things like strawberries in southern Spain, a place like that. That's what's happening. Is that following the flow of nature? Well, it will be if you're eating them in southern Spain. But if you're living in England, what you're doing is you're going away from that. I'm not going to say that will cause a health problem. I'm just saying that you're not actually thinking about the flow of nature when you do something like that, when you choose it. It doesn't mean that you can't ever do it, but don't make it be a part of your daily life routine.
And make it
try to find out what's
conscious choice.
Yeah, that's it. Make it a conscious choice. It's like having an ice cream. I couldn't live on ice cream as my only meal every day. Could I? I don't know. Actually, I have to think about that. But you don't, do you? You'll have an ice cream every now and again, or whatever it is, or piece of chocolate, or whatever. I'm not going to be addicted to it. I'll never let it take over my life. I'll make the choice, and I think people can do that. If you can live with natural food, the one thing that you will find is that you'll feel healthier.
I think, for those listening today to this podcast, take away from this the opportunity to become the observer of the choices that you make with regards to your health. The thoughts you think, the feelings you feel, the food choices you make. And if you really want to make a start, then just become an observer also of the moon and what phase it's in, what's occurring, and notice how you're feeling, notice how you're reacting, notice the things that you're doing, and just become aware of that. Start building some awareness around that, because as we move through this, you're going to find there's so much useful information available to you about you when you start to be more aware of yourself.
And I would suggest, if we're going to do that, make some notes. I'm going to use the word journal, so don't back off. No, I'm not asking.
A notepad and pen will do.
And how about this? Hey, the moon is in a waning phase, and I feel like I'm slowing down and I need to release some baggage that's holding me back. It's only one sentence. You don't have to go into any detail, or you could go into detail, but you don't have to make it a chore. Just think of how you feel. Then look back on it at the end of a month. What do I mean by the end of a month? Well, that's your choice. What's the end of a month? You could say, well, on the full moon, I'm going to call that the start of the month, or the end of the month, or whatever you want to, or a new moon, or whatever. I don't really know or care. That's up to you. But a month later, have a look back and see the moon was in this phase, and, it was like 80% bright or something, which it is at the moment while we're doing this podcast here. It's 80% bright because we're waxing gibbous, which means it's getting fat. It's no longer a crescent. It's getting fat. It's pregnant now. It's heading
as
towards.
Is my tummy.
Well, it's only because we're just after Christmas, surely. But you know what I mean. It's worth keeping a note. When you do, you'll start aligning with the rhythms of the moon's natural flows without even trying. You won't have to put any effort in to do it. You'll notice. Some people quicker than others, but you will notice that it starts happening. Same with natural eating. Same with the thoughts that you have of wanting to do things. What I will say is that fighting the natural flows in nature causes problems, big problems. And they can end up with physical problems as well. Because you end up with emotional problems when you fight it. And then with emotional problems that you do nothing about, they can show up as physical problems too.
Wow. It's like trying to stop a tree from sprouting leaves.
Yes. And I'm not going to sit on a chair next to the tree and say, stay inside that twig. Do not sprout. I'm not going to try that. I loved it when people told King Canute, the Viking king in northern England, and they were telling him, you're so powerful, our king. You can do anything. You could even stop the waves. And he went down to the beach and said, follow me. I'm going to try and tell that tide not to come in. Needless to say, they all got wet. People tell that story as though King Canute was the idiot trying to stop the sea, because the true story is he was proving to his followers, hang on, I am still just a man. Don't put me on a pedestal. Yes, I am your leader at the moment, but I'm not a god. You're telling me that I can stop the tide coming in? Ridiculous. Let's all go down there. And that's what he did. He was being very human, and he was saying, don't fight the flow of nature because you can't. And
There
I
you
think that's
go.
fantastic. I thought that was a really, really cool example for that. So, remember, I think that, you should look at nature. I think you should look at the moon's rhythms and how nature does that. Do you think that at some point, Julie, we should just have a little talk about when to plant seeds, when to harvest, and it's let's say, vegetables that grow under the ground, which phases of the moon to plant, which phases to harvest, and so on like that? Because guess what? It works.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's loads of evidence of that. There are people that really do it. And so we should talk about that because that's following the flow of nature as well.
Yeah.
And it's getting in tune with those rhythms. Once you start doing it, you start enjoying it, you can do anything. It doesn't mean that you have to change your life completely. It means that the life you have got suddenly becomes better. That's what I like, and that's why I want to do these podcasts. I mean, this is what we said we were doing them for, isn't it? To help people make that change and make that understanding, break away from certain beliefs that I'm not blaming anybody for holding, because we all do. We're given them at an early age. And once we realize that we don't have to believe in those beliefs and we can actually test other things, we can look at ourselves as a unique being, not saying that every human being is exactly the same. By the way, how can we say people are not the same? Hiroshima, atom bomb, 1945. Yes, people died instantly, but there were people that had radiation sickness. Not everybody had it. Not everybody. Plenty did. But some people had worse experiences of it than others, even though they were in the same place, the same distance from the explosion. But we can go through it all. Not everybody had exactly the same experience. If it's devastating, like the guys that went into Chernobyl, the ones that really went in to the depths to try to stop what was going on, I don't think that any of those could have had much difference, because I mean that was like everybody standing in a fire. If you threw every human being into a volcano, believe me, the result would be exactly the same. There wouldn't be one of them that just crawled out, shaking off the lava, would there? But in nature, in the way that we live our lives, not everything is the same. You look at yourself and follow those flows. It's really fantastic. We've said that about 60 times, haven't we, now in this recording?
Who's counting?
But it's the phases. It's knowing the phases, and we'll mention them again. We can talk about waxing, waning, but we will actually be discussing the nature of the full moon and the nature of that dark moon, the new moon. Yeah. But there is a time when the moon is not visible, and so we'll be looking at all of those. But we're going to start off with the next podcast, be waxing or waning, depending on when we record it, because we'll do what the moon is when we record it. So it'll either be waxing or waning next time. And we're going to start going into more detail. And so I hope everybody's enjoyed this. I hope you haven't turned off, because we started off talking about the science and scientists. We did quote real scientists, by the way, to say that things aren't right. And you will see the notes at the bottom. Journaling is great. You don't have to spend all night writing page after page. Great if you can, if you want to. But you could just, how about this? If you want to journal regularly, even if one day you don't want to do it, you can just write, didn't feel like writing anything today.
Because that's information.
That's information as well. And then go back and say, what was I like that day when I didn't feel like it? What was the phase of the moon? What am I doing? Yeah. So, you can do that. Anything else we should say before we sign off, Julie?
Yeah, just experiment. Just, it's really about stepping back from what you think you know, and allowing nature to present itself to you. There's nothing here that's set in stone. Your experience is unique. Your health is unique. And we want to give you all the tools and all the information so that you can take charge of your health.
Yep, and we will be doing that, won't we, as these podcasts go along.
Cool.
We'll be getting more detailed about the things that we talk about, and we'll be giving you tools and ways of learning and ways of actually acting upon the things that you want to act upon. And I think that's where we really are heading with these podcasts soon. So what I will do is I'll say goodbye from now, and we'll end this one, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you all for coming and listening, and I'll say goodbye. So it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
see you later. Bye-bye.